I'm really happy with Hamilton's comeback from 18th place, starting from the pit lane, to 7th place, and also being classified as driver of the day. He made a great comeback. Leclerc's 3rd place also confirms Ferrari is a good team. But we'll talk about that shortly, and we also have to talk about Piastri's victory, the clash for the World Championship between Piastri and Norris. Of course, before we begin, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you don't miss any videos that come out here on the channel. Every day, we analyze all the news related to Formula 1 and Ferrari, as well as what happens on the track. Having said that, let's immediately take a look at the rankings that we go and comment on it together. With the victory of Piastri, Norris, 2nd place. 3rd place for Leclerc, who defended himself until the end from Verstappen. In the 4th, 5th Russell, 6th Albon, 7th Hamilton, driver of the day. He made a great comeback. It's a shame that we couldn't get Albon, but he made some incredible overtaking moves. I use it in 8th, Bortoleto, 9th, Gasly, 10th. This is the top 10, and then all the others gradually. Note guys, the final gap between Piastri and Norris, 3.4 seconds. 3 seconds and 4 is a gap that is a bit too much from my point of view, having the same car. Having Norris made so many mistakes in the race, it shows that Piastri at this moment is more ready to win the World Championship, to fight up there. Norris has been making too many mistakes for a while now. Sometimes they are masked by slightly more disappointing performances than Piastri, but Norris' mistakes are evident. Even today, he went long in several corners. He made mistakes both at Pohang. He also made mistakes in turn 1, at Sorgente, at Source, and he made these mistakes. Obviously, the complicated pit stop, a little slower, also penalized him, and then they also chose a different tire. We saw that Piastri chose the medium tire, while Norris chose the hard tire, with Piastri who rightly stopped first because he was leading the race, and then Norris who stopped later chose a different tire, the hard, which however in this race here, the hard didn't perform well. In fact, if you see, he was the only one to choose it to do something different. But the medium was the race tire also, because the track conditions predicted a very cold track, with low temperatures since it was a drying track, and therefore a tire that gives you more grip is better. You can use it more to your advantage. And I also want, before commenting on Hamilton's situation, and we'll also look at the replay of some of the overtaking moves he made, I also want to comment on Leclerc, because Leclerc finished 3rd, he held off Verstappen until the very end, and he drove a great race in my opinion. In fact, Leclerc got the most out of the car, and more than that in my opinion could not have been done, in the sense that the McLaren was unreachable. Just defending himself from Max was something sensational, in the sense that Max had the pace to try to fight for the podium. I told you yesterday and I showed it today too, but Charles, despite having a less powerful car, and it was especially evident in the first part of the race, in wet conditions with the intermediate track, we saw a Charles who was in a bit more difficulty, who defended himself especially thanks to his top speed. But in the slow corners at the bus stop, for example, he struggled more, and despite this he managed to bring home a very important podium for Ferrari, because he himself declared that the updates worked. The update to the rear suspension gave the results Ferrari hoped for. And so he is very happy about this. I'll also let you read his statement after the race. The pressure in battling with Max is very high, and at a certain point I told Brian Bozzi, who is his race engineer, to leave me alone, let me drive, and so sometimes, obviously, I need him to give me information. But today I didn't need it. Referring to Brian Bozzi, this is also a bit of a reference to Kimi Raikkonen, in the sense that it was a hectic moment where Leclerc wanted to fight only for that podium and not think about anything else. And so he needed to be left alone, and for this reason he asked Brian Bozzi not to speak, to leave him alone in that moment. So a lot of stuff, great podium by Leclerc it shows us, as said before, a good performance by Ferrari with our rear suspension. Objectively, Ferrari was the second car today. If we also look at Mercedes and Red Bull, who yes, showed some flashes of competitiveness, but Ferrari was stronger. We saw both with the most unloaded car, Leclerc's, and also with the most loaded car, Hamilton's. In fact, we also talk a bit about Lewis, before going to listen to the various team radios, and because Lewis made a very interesting choice at the start of the race. In fact, they fitted him with a high downforce rear wing, They completely changed the setup of Hamilton's Ferrari as F25 single-seater. So starting from the pit lane, they changed the setup, violating the parc ferme, but in a smart way for Ferrari. And they also changed the rear wing of Hamilton's red car, and in this way Hamilton started from the pit lane. But he had a car set up for the wet, unlike Leclerc, who starting from third place obviously couldn't change the setup. He chose the right setup for qualifying on Saturday, but he struggled a little more in the first part of the race. Hamilton, on the other hand, made the right choice. Ferrari was very smart to consider this possibility, and so they changed the setup. Antonelli and Alonso also made this choice, and they made it to try to recover later in the race. Hamilton got off to a flying start. In fact, when they started the race under a rolling start, so not a standing start, but behind a safety car at the restart, Hamilton was immediately able to attack several drivers, passing 2 or 3 drivers even per lap, so the setup allowed him to do this. We know Hamilton is a phenomenon in wet conditions, and he demonstrated his strength on the track. The only thing is, I'm extremely happy with Hamilton's reaction. Also because I'll show you a detail that shows us this. So if you look at Hamilton's times, he finished in 7th place. And on the last lap, in the first sector of the last lap, he did his best sector ever of the race. So it means he was pushing until the end to try to catch Albon. In fact, he got to him about 0.7 of a second behind Albon. Hamilton tried until the end to take that 6th position, and this shows us that he is a driver who never gives up on Lewis, and this is fundamental in Ferrari, and very often his competitiveness is questioned a little. Because it often happens that maybe in qualifying he finishes behind Leclerc, but maybe in qualifying he struggles a little more with this car. But in the race he always shows us that he is a phenomenon. Especially in these conditions he manages to excel. He showed it to us today. So great Hamilton, his comeback is great. I'll also show you the initial part of the race here with an Aston Martin. You see a Williams on the outside, and here the Aston Martin in the middle, and with a Hamilton here studying the situation. We see that he was trying to overtake, but he then made several overtakes during the race too. Let's also look at what he did on Gasly. Very good. And Lewis had a great race from my point of view. He really showed off his potential, and this was fundamental. This, for example, is the overtake he made on Gasly. Very good, because he did it in a spot where you don't usually overtake. Here, it was still in wet conditions. He slipped inside, still having more grip on the tires. Thanks also, obviously, to the more wet setup, and he managed to bring home this overtake. Great. Now I'll let you hear it. I'll obviously also show you the driver of the day vote for Hamilton, who started 18th, finished 7th, and 38% of the people voted him as driver of the day. Rightly so, in my opinion, because he drove a great race, even if another driver of the day is Piastri. And later we'll also comment on the papaya issue and the McLaren issue. But first I'll also show you another image here of Hamilton, P18, starting position and race finish, P7. Let's also listen to the team radios, both of Leclerc and Hamilton, because they were very interesting and they show us the current state of Ferrari. Let's go listen to Hamilton's and then let's listen to Leclerc's. Let's go listen to Leclerc's. Let's go listen to Leclerc. This is Hamilton's team radio, which basically tells him before doing some pickups to go and get more material even on the outside of the track. To increase the weight of the car, he reached the limit even in the pit lane. When entering the pits, he went into neutral, precisely because he was low on fuel, and therefore he obviously has to stay within the limits. Let's hope everything goes well, that there isn't a penalty. In any case, they communicated this to him here. Furthermore, Hamilton apologized for the weekend afterwards, meaning that it was his fault to start 18th, and we have to say this. Because in qualifying both on Friday and Saturday, so both in sprint qualifying and in qualifying for the race, which however was on Saturday, he performed a bit poorly, in the sense that you can't end up in a bad situation with this Ferrari here, even with the updates brought, seeing your teammate starting in 3rd place. So there, we definitely have to say that Hamilton made a mistake, and he admitted it himself. But then, in the race, he had a great race, and that was very important. To give this reaction, the signal to Ferrari, that he is there regardless. Even when negative situations happen to us, he doesn't give up. Hamilton gave everything until the end, and this was fundamental. And I also want to bring in Charles' radio team, and let's go listen to Brian Bozzi too. Thank you. Then we saw that Russell and Leclerc are very close to Hamilton, a sign that the SFT5's performance is there, and Ferrari is still second in the Constructors' Championship. 516 points for McLaren, 248 for Ferrari, and in 3rd place we have Mercedes at 220 points, so a difference of 28 points at the moment between Ferrari and Mercedes in Ferrari's favor. So the battle for 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship is still heated, but Ferrari has increased the gap from Mercedes a bit, and this was important. Also because in the comeback, Antonelli still struggled a lot today. He finished 16th outside the points zone, despite starting close to Hamilton, while Hamilton managed to finish 7th. So this further demonstrates the fact that Hamilton had a great race today. Leclerc also had an excellent race, we said, defending himself very well from Verstappen. And Piastri also had an excellent race. In fact, Piastri finished in 1st position. He achieved an excellent victory. 8 victories in Formula 1 for Piastri, 8 victories in Formula 1 for Norris. Let's consider the fact that Norris has been racing in Formula 1 since 2019, so for many more years than Piastri, who has been racing in Formula 1 for a few years, not very many, so this has made a big difference. And this is certainly also important to consider from a championship perspective. Because these 8 victories, Piastri means a lot, he achieved it recently. Until last year he was considered, if you like, the 2nd driver in McLaren. This year instead, he is almost the 1st driver who carries the show, if you like. And instead on the other side, we have a Norris who makes mistakes. He struggles more. We set the mistakes on the track, both when he was recovering at P1, and also at the source. Also then, in the pits, many mistakes made. The only positive sign that Norris had was in yesterday's qualifying, where he took pole position. For the rest, even today, the mistake at the start is an inconceivable mistake. Let's go and look together at the moment of the start, because that's where Piastri won the race from my point of view. In fact, here at the start, we see that Norris didn't get off to a good start, despite having also had the privilege of having the rolling start. So the start in motion, let's say under the safety car, despite having also had this privilege. Well, Norris got off to a bad start, and Piastri took advantage of it to pass. He did well on Eau Rouge and Rattelian, and then he passed him on the straight after, the Kemmel one. So Piastri's start was a big deal. Norris's start was bad, and he once again felt the pressure from his teammate. And it's a Norris who is always very weakened by the presence of Piastri. Piastri understood that there is a weak point in Norris from a psychological point of view. He goes to exploit it. Piastri is very cold in his behavior. He knows what he wants to achieve, he knows what position he wants to get in, and therefore he does everything to put his opponent in difficulty. And therefore even afterwards in the team radio he remained very calm. Piastri, yes, he has the result, in the sense that he said, good is what I wanted to achieve in this race. I already knew since yesterday what I had to do it, and I did it in the race. So this was very important. And then this is also an important turning point for the World Championship, because if we look at the standings again, we have 266 points for Piastri, 250 points for Norris. We are not yet at the summer break. in the sense that there's the Hungary match again, the Lungaroringa match next week, the Budapest match. And so, after that match, we'll take stock of the mid-season. But already, now, with a 16-point difference between Piastri and Norris, the gap is starting to widen in Piastri's favor. So pay attention to this too. And I'd like to point out how Piastri made the difference immediately throughout the entire lap, while maintaining a constant pace. Also, because if we go and look at the best sectors, Norris has them sectors that are better than those of Piastri 38.40, 7.24, while Piastri 39.46.25. What made the main difference? Piastri's race pace was more consistent, and he also managed to make fewer mistakes than Norris. This thing here, in a World Cup, has a huge impact and should not be underestimated. That is, the driver who makes the fewest mistakes, and the driver who is most consistent, is the one who, with the best car, also manages to win the World Championship. And, on the contrary, when there is a car that is perhaps a little similar to the others, so there is a vagrancy between many drivers from different teams. So there the more talented driver emerges more than the consistent one. But, when they are both the same machine, consistency matters much more. Consistency is key in these situations. And Norris is proving to be inconsistent. This is kind of his limit at the moment. Beyond this, we saw the race. I also want to comment a little on the beginning. I'll also show you this interesting graphic from the beginning of the season to today. The only two drivers to have scored points in every race were Piastri and Hamilton. In any case, the decision to delay the departure was, in my opinion, justified, in the sense that there were no visibility conditions. The problem is always this type of car that they drive, which unfortunately lifts too much water from the rear, so from the diffuser, and it limits visibility a lot. And a track like Spa, given the precedence in 2021, where there had been a lot of water, very dangerous conditions, I understand the decision to delay. In the end, it was the right decision. Kozunoi then, also because afterwards they found better conditions. It's also true that you no longer use extreme wet weather tires, so it loses the sense of full wet tires and every little condition to extremely wet. Then you don't go running. So this is also wrong, but it's more due to the type of cars they have, which develop the load from the bottom, and so they raise a lot of water on the straights. That causes poor visibility conditions. And that's the main problem, which needs to be solved with mud flaps. Something that is going to intervene, or simply, as we will see next year, flat bottoms that do not have venture channels. So this will definitely help in wet conditions as well, because they will raise less water at the rear. I think I've covered a bit of everything. What I wanted to say, we saw it all, yes. And the most important thing to say, to highlight, in my opinion, the fact is that Ferrari did a great job anyway. 3rd Leclerc, 7th Hamilton. Anyway, it's a good performance by Ferrari. It's true that Verstappen and Russell also did very well, but the red car had the pace to hold onto that 3rd place, and this was crucial. We should obviously also evaluate Ferrari in the long run at the ring, a more technical route, with more twists and turns if you like, more of a cartography track. Also because there we will see the effectiveness of the rear suspension more, the red one, the new one. That said, let me know in the comments how you saw this race here in Belgium. As always, I remind you to leave a like, to subscribe and activate notifications, so you don't miss any Formula on themed videos and Ferrari themed ones that come out here on the channel. That's all from Rastro. See you in the next video.